Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's time for the Brown Sports Bag. From the heart of the Barrens, a weekly local sports machine. Alongside John Butler, here's your host, James Brown.
Welcome to the Brown Sports Bag with James Brown and John Butler. We are here to talk a little bit today about we're going to start out with some WKU football because they had a great win, an exciting win on an untimed down in the bowl game against Western Michigan, which seems to be a perfect bow on the turnaround of the season because if you will recall, last year they lost a game. Was that against Old Dominion on an untimed down after they missed a field goal and had a penalty, and it was a wild end to that one. And it just feels like justice is finally served for the Hilltoppers and their football program to come back and win a bowl game in the same sort of chaotic, crazy way that they lost so many games last year, doesn't it, John?
I guess. I don't even know I don't remember that, to be honest with you, against the Old Dominion. I don't, to be quite honest with you, but That
was the one where they had to play, and it was like nobody had ever seen a game end that way. You know, when they kept losing games in the craziest ways last year.
Sorry.
That's all right.
I kind of have canceled last season in my mind.
I don't blame you.
But I will say it is I am tickled to death for Coach Helton, the staff, and, everybody that's associated with Western Kentucky on just a great turnaround season, and it's a great way to go out on a field goal to win it. It's like hitting a three at the buzzer to win, to win a tournament game, and on national TV they had the whole, they had the main ESPN, they had all the audience there, and
should be a recruiting boon for the Hilltoppers going forward.
It can't hurt, and Coach Helton, as I said, he and Coach Satterfield at Louisville have just done fantastic jobs of changing, I think, the culture as much as anything, just coming in and implementing his offense, and he's such a kind of a low key, I guess you could say. I know he's not laid back, but he has that appearance that that things don't stress him too much.
He's not hyperactive.
He's not.
You don't expect him to panic under pressure.
Unlike a lot of football coaches who seem to be on edge the whole game, he seems to be much more laid back.
Yeah.
And under control as well of his emotions and so forth. I think he's a heck of a football coach, and to win it that way with what's unusual, it's the untimed down because they had 12 men on the field.
Yeah.
What's unusual was for the Tops to win on a field goal, which has been, I think it's fair to say, one of their weaknesses this year. They had a freshman kicker, and he's really struggled.
Corey Munson.
Yeah, he struggled.
He's missed 11 field goals this year.
Yeah, and he missed one earlier inside of 30 to end the first half.
Right.
And then to make one from 52.
Right.
And he had the win with him, but he split it, and to win it at the buzzer, just a fantastic finish for a really tremendous turnaround season and a fun season to watch too for the Tops.
Yeah, you mentioned Hilton's the fact that he changed the culture, but you can tell he changed how people respond to pressure as well. You look at this particular game, and you just pointed out the thing about Corey Munson. Yes, he missed some field goals during the course of the year. I mean, they had a couple of games they could have won if he'd have made some field goals. I think one game he missed like 2 field goals and an extra point, and that was basically the difference in the game. I don't remember which one that was. So, he's had a struggle this year as a freshman out of Warner Robins, Georgia, a place I think that's better known for its baseball than its football, but nonetheless. But you mentioned that, and obviously under this situation in the post-game interview with Terry Obie and Randy Lee and those guys, Helton said, he didn't feel good about the kick from 57. And so they were going to go for it from 57 yards, and they were going to go for it. I think there was 3 seconds left, and then they had to swap out. And there was the flag was thrown, but then the spot judge for the who puts the ball down and says play on, said that the ball had not been spotted yet, so there was no penalty for 12 men on the field against Western Michigan. They come back, they go run all over the field again, and then they get them on the penalty. And so when they move up to 5 yards, and Helton says, well, let's kick it and see if we can win it. What's to lose, basically, because the game's tied 20-all. But that patience that he has, and you can see the kind of calmness in that situation that his team had versus, I guess, maybe the way Western Michigan was running around the field. Even though he made a change in his decision-making within, a few seconds.
Yeah,
his team still managed to get out on the field and execute.
But 5 yards is a big deal.
It is a big deal.
In an odd way, a 52-yard field goal may have been an easier kick pressure-wise.
Oh yeah,
for this young kicker than a 30-yard one that everybody expects you to make.
That's a good point.
And it's like sometimes just end of game situations in basketball. Sometimes a three in the heat of the moment is an easier shot than a free throw.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually probably helped him a little bit because most people, they weren't going to blame him if he missed a 52-yard.
Yeah, because it's still tied game.
That's correct. So it's almost like this is a free square for you, and just go ahead and kick it. And,
right.
And I was tickled to death with him. I just like Helton's poise. The quarterback, Ty Story, has poise. And sometimes when your leader, whether it's your quarterback or your coach, has poise, if it reflects on your entire team.
Yeah.
And Western did not have a ton of penalties this year. I thought they were much more disciplined.
Yeah.
And they look prepared, too. They just look prepared for the moment. And I'll just say this. They're going to have a hard time keeping him.
They will indeed. I mean, and plus, we already see, the domino effect is in play because the NFL season ended and coaches immediately started being fired.
Yeah.
And college coaches will be on the list to be moved up.
But that will always be the case at Western Kentucky in football.
Yes, it will
If you got a good coach, you better have 2 or 3 other people in mind because they're going to come and take your coach for the most part. So you hope you can keep them for 3 or 4 years, i.e. Jeff Brom, and Coach Helton. You just hope you can keep them and have somebody in mind to replace them because he clearly he and Satterfield are very similar in terms of personality.
Yeah.
They're low-key but confident, and I think their teams play that way.
Couple of things. One is Todd Stewart, I would say, predominantly has done a good job
of hiring coaches.
Of hiring and having an idea of who he knows.
In multiple sports.
I guess the downtown square is burning down or something. And all the fire trucks are blowing through. But anyway, that's a joke. It's not really burning down.
It's not a joke. There are fire trucks everywhere.
There are police cars and fire trucks. So something has happened, and hopefully it's nothing serious. But anyway, Stewart has done a good job of being prepared to hire a coach.
Yes.
Because he's well aware of the position WKU is in. If you have a good coach, you don't want to not have a good coach, but you want to also know that that if he's good enough, he probably will be. Yeah,
it's a good sign that people want your coach.
Yeah. Meanwhile, a couple of things about this football game. One of the kids that had, one of the players that had one of the best days is a local guy in Ticorian Darden from Russellville. And if you think about it, this is his senior year, and he had a big play in the end zone when Western Michigan could have gotten a touchdown, and he deflected away a pass. I think that led to the field goal that put Western Michigan up 20-17, and then Western Michigan, with the game tied 20-20, had a chance to get in field goal position, and on fourth down they threw a pass, and he deflected that away.
Yeah, great coverage.
Yeah, great coverage, which led to the turnover and downs, which then set this dramatic end up.
That's correct, yeah.
And it's great because, he came in, he was an undersized player. He was a good athlete in high school and everything at Russellville, played for John Myers, who's now an assistant at Glasgow. But, he was a great athlete and all, but he was an undersized player. He's only like 5'9". He's not very big. He has built his way into being a solid defensive player for WKU for over the past, 5 years. Maybe he's a redshirt senior.
Yeah, that's great. And Western's got several kids now.
Yeah.
They got a couple from South Warren.
Clayton Bush was returning kicks and punts.
Lyman from Franklin is on the team, so they have it. But I also think Lucky Jackson didn't he look like an NFL prospect?
He certainly catches the ball like an NFL prospect.
He had 18 catches,
17 today, and he had already had the record earlier this year where he caught 16 in a game.
Yeah, he looks like a player that would be one of those 4th, 5th round draft picks that will stick with somebody if he gets in the right spot.
Yeah. And good for him, too, because he's another player on this team that has weathered the last couple of years and probably, obviously, was not, used as effectively as he could have been, I would have to say.
Recruited, I think, by the Bromstad.
Yes.
Who has a pretty good eye for receivers.
Yeah, they've done pretty well through the years with their receivers and tight ends, and Helton has. It's like Helton came in and said, "I know the best players on this team. I'm going to take advantage of them," and he did that.
He did,
which is kind of amazing in a way if you think about it. Meanwhile, let's talk about the WKU men's basketball team. They lost pretty badly to Belmont on Saturday. They just year in and year out, every time they play Belmont, they seem to have no answers for them.
Well, Belmont has, 6 straight victories over Western?
Yeah.
I mean, they play a style that's hard to guard. I mean, I've always said if I was at that level, I would like to have a team like Belmont. I'd like to always have 5 shooters on the floor.
Yeah, that's right.
Always.
Right.
Because that's, I like shooters. I like watching it. I think the game is to me, I just like that style, and Belmont has always had that style.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Western would guard them better, to be perfectly honest with you, because Western's small themselves. So
they've kind of gotten a 5-guard kind of setup.
Belmont does have a 6'11" kid on the inside,
and
who only had 12 points, and I just thought that perhaps Western would give him his points and guard their shooters, but they really did neither one. That was the problem. He got 12 to 14, and they also made a ton of threes. And Western's in a dilemma right now on what to do.
Yeah.
They have decided, and I thought they would, they put Josh Anderson in the lineup, and Carson Williams, who's only 6'5", is basically playing the 5. So they decided to go small. Now, if you're going to go small, though, you're going to have to play harder than anybody in the country.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't. I mean, you got to just you got to put your will and your style over your opponents and defend like crazy, whether that's trapping, scrambling, or whatever. And you've got to play harder than anybody.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying they didn't play hard because I didn't watch the entire game, but they never really. Belmont had control of that game throughout.
Well, and a lot of coaches, I mean, you including through the years, have said defense is effort.
It is, and their effort was not. I'm just saying you've got to play at a pace. If you're going to go small, you got to play at a pace that's really uncomfortable for your opponent.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't work, then I think he's going to have to look at playing maybe the backup post player. Mm-hmm. It gives him more size, 6'11". What's his Horton?
Horton.
May have to get some more minutes because they were. I'm not going to say dominated, but they were clearly outplayed by Belmont. Now they did play pretty well. We didn't talk. The loss when they went to. Not Delaware,
Rhode Island.
Rhode Island. They played well and lost in overtime with this same lineup, but without the point guard, who's ineligible, and now without obviously Bassey, it's going to be a tough going. I
think they are 2-5 since Bassey went down, or they're maybe they've. I don't remember exactly. I was doing it. Yeah, they're 2-5. I think they're 2-5 since he went down. They've won.
No, they haven't played that many games.
No, I'm sorry. They're 1-4 since he went down. That's what it is. And they've played 5 games. I was trying to do those numbers earlier. And the thing is that most of those games they played Louisville in that stretch, and
now Louisville, they had him for Louisville.
He got hurt the next game.
Yeah, he got hurt at home against Arkansas.
That's right.
Late in the game. I
think that's right.
They beat Arkansas.
Yeah, I think they're 1-4 since he went down, but I think the problem is what you said. I mean, with this Belmont game, they didn't do either thing really well against Belmont. Now, Belmont is a difficult matchup.
They are
in a lot of ways because they play differently than a lot of folks. But you're right. I mean, either they have to figure out that they're going to stop you from scoring, or they're going to try to outscore you if they're not going to. And they don't seem to know which one yet. But they do get to start conference play on Thursday night against North Texas at Diddle Arena. And I still think overall they're probably one of the more talented teams in Conference USA.
They are, but they got the old double whammy. This is crazy to say. I'm not for sure the loss of the point guard that they never had is not as equal as a loss of Bassey.
Yeah. Well, the anticipation of having somebody who could really control the
because
ball.
the lack of point guard play the last couple of years has really been their dilemma.
Right,
it's been their problem. from passing and among other things, just leadership on the court.
Yeah.
And they were really counting on him, and not having him and then losing Bassey, I think you can argue they lost their two most important pieces.
Yeah, and that just means that some of these guys like Josh Anderson and all will
Jordan
probably
and Rawls.
Yeah, they're gonna have to discover some things about themselves this year if they want to be successful.
And to be honest, the other players have got to play better.
Oh yeah,
I mean Hollingsworth has to play better.
Yeah.
The transfer shooter Cam.
Justice
has to shoot the ball better.
Yes.
I mean, he's had some games this year where he was 2 for 9 or 1 for 10, things like that. I mean, It's not just who they don't have; the ones that are back have got to play better.
Yeah, in essence, what has happened is they have not exactly the same team back that they had last year. They've added some pieces to the pieces that returned. Now that excludes Bassey. But in a lot of ways, it's not like they're inexperienced. They have an experienced team. They just have to learn to play better.
It's unlike football, for example, when you have 80 to 100 people on your roster.
Yeah.
Basketball is so much different. If you lose one or two key pieces in basketball, it kills you.
Yeah.
Because it's not like you're taking somebody out for offense and defense. I mean, you got to play both ways. And one or two players in basketball, especially if they're that important, just really, really hurts you.
Yeah.
You just don't have the depth on a basketball roster as you would in football.
Now, meanwhile, the Lady Tops, they also open conference play on Thursday at North Texas. That looks like a pretty good matchup for them. And then they play Rice on Saturday, and that'll be an interesting game, I think.
Well, they're coming off a 15-day layoff, which is –
that is crazy long.
Well, yeah, and that's not what Coach Collins wanted, but it just so happened – worked out that way this year.
Right.
And it's a tough layoff. It's a long layoff in basketball. It's almost like restarting.
Yeah.
North Texas is a game. I just don't know how they'll play after a layoff, but it's a game that we should win.
Yeah. Probably a good game to come back off the layoff.
I wouldn't want to play Rice first. Rice is a top 25 team.
Yeah.
And they're legit. And they're the best defensive team, not only in the conference, they're one of the top defensive teams in the country because they have a 6'8" post player who just basically eliminates any shot within 5 feet of the basket.
Right.
And but she's not the only one. They have other good players.
Yeah.
That's one of those tough trips when you have to go to Texas and you play that Thursday, Saturday.
Yeah.
And you end with a really good Rice team. It's if they go 1-1 on that trip, I think that's probably what we actually expect.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to them because I look forward to this game with Rice because I think at this point, would you think that maybe the Lady Toppers are maybe the second best team in Conference USA?
Until somebody beats Rice, I think it's fair. I think it's Rice, Western, then Middle.
Yeah. So I think it's bad that it comes after that 15-day layoff, but at least they get that North Texas game in there, and then they can get their feet wet, and then we can see how they match up against Rice.
I think that's fair.
This Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, the local teams, Barron and Glasgow, boys, girls, they had a busy post-Christmas time. I mean, considering they didn't play so much before Christmas. They all played a little bit, maybe not the Glasgow boys, or not the Glasgow girls, but they all got in at least 3 games after Christmas, 26th through the 29th, and played some pretty decent competition overall. Let's start out with the Barron County boys. I mean, they had a pretty good run, I guess, but I think they probably got a measurement that they were interested in getting, because they ended up they
went 1-2 in South Laurel.
Yeah, and the interesting thing was, they played Bell County, and they lost that game in overtime by 6. They played Roger Bacon out of Cincinnati. They lost that game in overtime by 7, and then they beat Russell County by 23. And I'm not sure if we know yet whether or not Russell County's good. It's kind of hard to know because they've won some games and lost some games. But that's a pretty good run, I think, overall, because I'm sure that the 2 losses were solid competition. And, I don't know if...
Well, yes and no. Let's just be... They should have beaten Bell County.
Yeah.
And I think they probably should have won their second one. They had good leads in both games.
Yeah.
Bell County is okay. They're not great. They had a kid that had 28 points against Barron. Barron got off to good starts in all three games. That's been a recurring theme this year. Barron's gotten off to really good starts.
That's true.
Got in foul trouble. Both Niken and Bandy were in foul trouble for almost the entire tournament, it seemed like.
Mm-hmm.
But did not finish as well as I think Coach Cunningham wanted against either team.
Yeah.
And I think it's fair to say he was disappointed. He was happy to get that third win against Russell County, who by the way beat Greenwood earlier in the year.
Yeah.
So a 20-point win against Russell County is that's good. But I think Warren really wanted to beat Bell because he wanted to play St. X.
Yeah.
And St. X was the team that was next in line if Barron had taken care of business and. It's tough when you lose in overtime, but it's real tough when you lose twice in overtime, and especially if you think you probably should win those games.
Yeah.
So, they had played so well going into that, had won four in a row, I believe, and just had blitzed teams.
Mm-hmm.
And went up there and got off to good starts, but just couldn't finish. But some of it had to do with foul trouble, but some of it just had to do with not making the plays that they needed to make, or a shot here, there, down the stretch. But all in all, I think Warren would take his record right now going into the new year.
Yeah. What do you think as a coach? I mean, what do you think? You play those 3 games in those 3 days. Ended up playing Friday, Saturday, Sunday instead of on Thursday. Instead of starting on Thursday. But what do you think as a coach? The messages that Warren has for his team coming out of those 3 games. I mean, because you mentioned losing 2 in overtime. Those are the kinds of things that they're going to experience as it gets tougher down the road in district games and that kind of stuff.
I think he just wants to practice.
Yeah.
They hadn't practiced forever because if you remember before even that tournament, they played like 4 games in 5 days. They played that Friday, Saturday, Monday, Tuesday.
Yeah.
And Tuesday beforehand. So they haven't been in the gym in which you could really solidly practice for a couple weeks. I think what Warren will do is he's not going to just look at those 2 losses. He's going to look at, okay, where are we right now?
Well, I'm sure. I know he was disappointed in the Hopkinsville loss because he didn't think they handled the pressure very well during that game.
But Hopkinsville presses like very few teams can.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was an issue. I didn't see the games up there. So I think he's just going to go back and try to just work on probably late game situations.
Yeah.
Other aspects, sometimes you'll have slippage when you don't practice for a while. All you do is play games. You'll probably want to work on some half-court sets and things of that nature. I think defensively they've been pretty good all year.
Yeah.
Only trouble they get into at times is foul trouble, with especially with they do have depth, but Niken and Bandy are a little bit different because of their size and scoring ability.
They have people who can come in and play inside,
but
they don't have people who can come in and replace those guys inside.
No, they're good, and they're really really special players, and it's each one in of itself you can replace for minutes during a game. It's hard to play without both of them,
right?
And that's what they've had to do for minutes at a time. So I think the big thing is he took. I'm sure they took off. After playing Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'm sure they took off today. I hadn't talked to Warren, and they'll probably be back in the gym Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or at least Wednesday and Thursday, and try to, one day will be preparation for Glasgow, but I would think 2 days would be just working on yourself, trying to get better. Yeah,
you mentioned the Glasgow, the annual holiday Glasgow Barron County game is this coming Friday.
That's right.
And none of these teams are actually playing before that game. So they will have had a few days off, but I mean, almost a week, really, when you get down to it, without games before they play on Friday night over at Glasgow. Girls' games at 6, boys' games at 7:30. I think both of them would be pretty interesting to see.
Yes.
Meanwhile, the Glasgow Scotties, I mean, they lost a heartbreaker, really, to Greenwood, 55-53, to start out the tournament over there at the Purple's Holiday Classic. And I think Greenwood hit a shot, like basically at the buzzer to win the game. And then they came back. They beat North Hardin pretty soundly. They beat them by 18. I don't think North Hardin is the kind of North Hardin
they're not.
We're used to seeing.
But Glasgow needed that.
They did indeed.
Every game they played, for the most part, other than Monroe, has been a dogfight.
Yeah.
Just been. I mean, their schedule they played has been tremendous. So,
Yeah.
so they needed I'm not going to say an easy game, but they needed a game where they could get some other players in and just finally just breathe. And
Yeah.
they haven't really had those games.
Yeah, and then they come back and they beat Franklin Simpson by 10.
It's a good win. Franklin's been
Yeah,
competitive with a lot of teams.
I think Franklin has been surprising people a little bit. They're not.
Beat Greenwood again. I mean,
They're not great, but they're not bad.
good enough to beat teams because
Yes.
they're athletic and,
Yeah.
and long and so forth.
And they're a team that will apply a lot of pressure to you and force you into mistakes and try to take advantage of that.
They will.
They're not going to shoot the lights out, but they'll do all the other stuff. But, yeah, that was a good win and a 10-point win. And as you mentioned, I mean, it's the kind of thing they needed. They needed to grind out some of these. Actually, I guess what they needed is some games where they didn't have to grind them out when you get down to it.
Just win and the 10-point. The Franklin game was it's closer than just 10. But
Yeah,
the North
yeah.
Hardin was not.
No.
They were actually up over 20 in the last quarter.
Yeah.
And it's nice just to kind of sub out, kick back, and just kind of you're not as stressed as much. But I will say, their schedule has clearly challenged them, to say the least. And I would think for Coach Willett, 2 or 3 days off is something that they desperately need.
Yeah, and I will tell you this: they had Tucker Kirkpatrick's name in the scorebook. He didn't log any minutes during these games over in Bowling Green, but they had him down. I don't know. I mean, maybe they anticipate being able to get him at least some minutes come Friday night against Barron. I don't know that for a fact, but at least it seems like things were on schedule for what they hoped they could accomplish with him being able to come back in January.
Hope so.
It'd be great to see him back on the floor. I mean, I know they've missed him definitely offensively. But it'll,
should be a good game between those two. Barron has enough. Both teams have size.
Yeah.
Glasgow starts 3 kids 6'5" or bigger. Barron has 2 6'5", 6'6".
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how they match up to deal with Jaden Franklin.
They have enough size to guard him.
Yeah.
Nick Sorrell has been the wild card in the last few years.
Yeah.
He's the one that Barron has really struggled stopping, and he's made big play after big play. He's obviously a big factor, and Barron's outside shooting. At times they've shot it well. Jacob Shaw has been a pleasant surprise his shooting.
Yeah.
So it's it should be a classic game between the two.
Yeah, a lot of times through the years, I've said I actually hate this rivalry not because of the rivalry itself, but because a lot of times what happens in these games is you just get ugly games. The teams do not, I guess because of the emotions, the teams usually don't play their best, even if the game's close. But there have been exceptions through the years, and the talent level
the first game in particular.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
The last few years they played in the district has been really good games.
Yes, they have been, and yeah, but this game is usually kind of ugly. I guess it's because of the break and the holidays and all that. And as we've already talked about with Warren wanting to get back in the gym, just working on the little things.
Like WKU of L.
Yeah,
they generally are not great games. This last one, actually, both teams played pretty well the second half.
Yeah. We will, at the end of this show, we'll talk a little bit about that game.
Okay.
I didn't put it on the list,
All
but
right.
I meant to. That was my fault.
Okay.
Anyway.
And the girls?
Yep, and the girls, the Barron County girls, they faced a really good team in Anderson County. It's the second team they've played, which is basically a top 5 team in the state. Kind of a lopsided outcome, but I guess, again, there's probably experiences to be gained from this competition.
Well, they went to Berea, and they went 3-1.
Yeah.
They won their first, and then lost to Anderson and 59-21. Now,
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, that surprised me. Now, going 3-1 tonight, Dan, and it's funny, they have not had a lot of close games.
I know, because the other 3, they blew out the opponent.
30 points or more.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been typical this year. Their only tight games have been Bowling Green, E-Town, and Anderson County.
Uh-huh.
And E-Town and Anderson are definitely, in my opinion, top 5 teams in the state.
Yeah.
Anderson County is loaded. They've got Henry Clay's best player, sophomore transferred in.
Is that right?
Really has made them good. I was still surprised at the score. One thing Barron has been able to do during this last run or two is they have been able to score. They scored against E-Town, but only scored 21 was a little surprising to me. But Barron is, I think they're really good. They've got 3 losses going into the new year, but they were to I think Bowling Green is probably in the top 20.
Yeah.
And E-Town and Anderson are top 5 teams. So it's that they have taken care of business with just explosive wins. They're scoring at an incredible rate, except against Anderson County. And I think the game between Barron and Glasgow Friday, I think you can make an argument I think Bowling Green's the top girls team in the region. Mm-hmm. I think Barron and Glasgow, especially how Glasgow performed after Christmas, I think the argument right there is who's the second best team. I think Barron and Glasgow are 2-3, however you want to put them.
Yeah. Back to this playing in this Berea tournament, it's an interesting because usually if you see a tournament like this and you've got Anderson County in it and Barron County's, been good the last 2 or 3 years, you'll see other really good teams, and so you'll see a lot of really close games in a tournament like this. That was not the case at this tournament. It was
Barron and Anderson were the best 2 teams in it.
Yeah,
they just played a little earlier. Male was in it, but Male had lost a lot of players from last year.
Right.
But at one time, the 2 best girls tournaments were the Lexington Catholic tournament and the Berea tournament.
Oh yeah.
But
I remember you guys went up there one year and played some really good.
That's when Berea it was played at the university. Now it's played at the high school. It's still a good tournament. But at one time it was 32 teams.
Yeah.
And now it's 16.
Okay. Well, I just thought the scores from the tournament were fascinating based on
not a lot of close games.
They were not.
Which is great if it keeps the games on time with that running clock.
Just get them over and get the next one in. And you mentioned Glasgow. They before Christmas I talked to Justin and he had said maybe
he was not happy with how they played before Christmas.
No, they had played well in a couple of games in terms of teams they should beat, and they did, and they shot the ball well in those games. He was unhappy that they were not shooting the ball well, especially from 3 in games that were tougher competition. And so he told me, he said we're gonna apply the gas, and we're gonna basically see who wants to play. And he came back after Christmas because they had a long time off before they played again. And they came back after Christmas, and they played extremely well in this tournament.
Well, he took the old school approach. And the old school approach is you pick a tournament. You play one tournament.
Yeah.
You're either going to play before, and then you'll practice afterwards and work on things, or you'll play after and practice up into that time.
Yeah.
Most people today play in both.
Yeah.
So Justin went more old school, and he used that time to practice. And I do think he was a little frustrated with how they played. And I think a couple of things happened. Number one, if you notice, their scoring picked up dramatically after Christmas.
Yeah.
They blew out Boyle County, blew out Greene County, and that's a good win against Greene.
Yeah, they held Greene to 27 points,
that's right.
Which is pretty impressive.
And then blew out Nelson, and just the points they put up was impressive to me. They made 9 threes, I think, against Greene.
Yeah.
And one of the things they started to do is I think they began to play a little bit faster, picking up more on the full court, sometimes half court. And I think Justin and most good coaches have to. Piper made this adjustment last year, if you notice. She started pressing after Christmas. Mm-hmm. And I think Justin has watched the first so many games and decided that maybe we need to play faster.
Yeah.
Maybe either fits his personnel, or B, maybe that's what his players wants to do.
Yeah.
And you'll have to, sometimes as a coach, you have to figure out one of the two. Sometimes if both your players want to play faster and it's good for your team, that's perfect.
Yeah.
And that may be what they found. And then, you had Gore and Adwell had a fabulous tournament. I think Gore had a double-double every game, and Adwell had a double-double rebounds and points as well. Dynasty Page, I think she had 5 threes against Greene.
Yeah.
So, they shot the ball better, they played faster, and at the same time, they continued to guard people. That's a good sign.
Before the Christmas break, they played the Warren Central and they played Adair County. Those are 2 games they should have won.
And
what did happen in those games, though, is he was able to get some of his younger players in and get them into games and let them start shooting the ball and playing. And I think maybe that helped out in this post-Christmas thing as well, because he just managed to start getting more players in there and getting them comfortable with playing under pressure maybe.
Maybe, but you can do that when you're up 20.
Well, that's right. Well, and going back to the playing faster thing, the thing about Ashanti Gore that people probably miss on is she can run the floor.
Yes.
And I imagine it's pretty good if you can get her the ball in the post in the early offense. The quicker you can get her there and get the ball in her hands next to the basket, probably the better off you are all the way around.
Well, it should be two great games. It should be two very great is overused. It should be two good games Friday night.
Yeah.
Very interesting to watch the girls' game and the boys' game. I don't know if they're toss-ups one way or the other, but I do know they're both teams match up well with each other, both the girls and the guys. And I do think you're seeing two of the top 3 girls teams in the region. Mm-hmm. And in the boys, I think you can argue they're 2 of the top 6.
Yeah. I might even say top 5, depending on how it breaks down.
I agree with that.
Well, this is Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, the NFL playoffs are set. All the games are played. And, hey, the interesting thing is this regular season ended on a great play between Seattle and San Francisco.
But the tackle was a great play, right?
Yeah, the tackle was a great play.
Stop him at the goal line.
But it did not feel like that Pete Carroll once again blew a situation where his team could have won a game because they got to delay a game after a ball spike, and it's like they ran around for 25, 30 seconds not knowing what they were going to do.
Big difference between first and goal at the 1 and first and goal at the 6 with 22 seconds to go.
Yeah, because, they got Marshawn Lynch back in the earlier goal line run. He made that one look easy. And I feel like if they'd have had that play again, he'd have made that one look easy, and then the road to the Super Bowl through the NFC would be completely different than it is. But as it is, the 49ers held on and made a tackle and won the game, and they're the number 1 seed in the NFC. And in the AFC, the Ravens are the number 1 seed, so it goes to Baltimore. And we will get to see whether or not my theory plays out, the one I pitched for you last week, where I said I thought the Patriots could beat the Chiefs, and the Chiefs could beat the Ravens, and the Ravens could beat the Patriots. So we'll see how that pans out. Because, if the Patriots they will take on the Titans on Saturday night. I think it's at 7:30, I think is when that game is. You can hear that game on 105.3 The Point with Mike Keith on the call. But the Titans have to go and play at New England, and then we will see whether or not the Patriots can beat them. They didn't look too good against the Dolphins on Sunday.
I think the Titans have a real chance because I think one of the weaknesses of New England here recently has been stopping the run.
Yeah.
And outside of Baltimore, nobody runs it better than Tennessee.
No, Derrick Henry finished as the season leader in rushing yards.
And the other factor is it seems like to me that Bill Belichick's ex-assistants do quite well against him.
Yeah.
The guy at Miami's his assistant. Mike Vrabel, they beat him last year at Tennessee. The Detroit head coach upset him last year at Detroit.
Yep.
So, you have that factor as well. I think the best team is I think it's going to come down to Baltimore and Kansas City. Mm-hmm. And I think San Francisco is the best team in the NFC. Baltimore has just destroyed teams.
Yeah.
Unlike the NFC, the NFL is generally close games throughout. The Ravens just mash people.
Yeah.
I think the one team that I would worry about the most that could upset them would be Kansas City.
Yeah.
Because I think they got the best overall. I think Lamar Jackson is the MVP, and obviously I like Lamar because of a Louisville connection. But I think the best player in football, quarterback, is Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
And that would be the one area that I would worry about with Baltimore. But Baltimore is so well coached. Mm. They've got a dominant offense. They look like all the tea leaves are flowing their way.
Right.
And in the NFC, I think it would be between New Orleans and San Francisco.
Yeah,
Green Bay is
13-3, and I don't know how they got there.
I'm not sold on them at all. But they're going to they got a bye, and they're going to get a home game at Lambeau, and that's big for them. But I'm not sold on Green Bay at all. And I think the world of it. I think Aaron Rodgers is a great player. Mm-hmm. But something about Green Bay, I'm just they don't look like to me to be in that category of San Francisco, New Orleans, Baltimore, and Kansas City.
Usually when you look at a team and you think, well, they have a chance to win the Super Bowl, what you say is they do a certain thing really well. Even if you think back to the Eli Manning Giants, the fact of the matter was they had defensive ends who rushed the passer really well. I mean, they could play a straight-up defense with a 4-man front and get pressure on the quarterback.
Right.
And, I mean, a lot of people overlooked that. But, I mean, that was the bread and butter of those teams both times. But you look at Green Bay and you're like, I don't know what they do well. And the truth, and that's
they run
true
the ball well.
They do.
Jones has had an incredible year. He's had 18 touchdowns. He had a big time year, and they got arguably him and Mahomes are probably the two best quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Lamar Jackson not included, but they don't. Outside of one receiver, I don't really like their passing game.
Yeah.
And they've really changed their offense a lot as well.
That's during the season because earlier in the year they didn't give the ball to Jones. I mean, it took them like 6 games to figure out they had a good running back.
Yeah, but I think that was more because their receiving core is very questionable, to say the least. So
Yeah.
I'm not sold on Green Bay. Like I said, I like to see Baltimore win it because of Patrick Mahomes. I mean, because of Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
And I also like Kansas City. I like Andy Reid. I think he's deserving.
Yeah.
It's hard not to like Drew Brees in New Orleans. There's some feel-good stories this year.
Right. The other thing about the whole setup for the NFL playoffs is that the Eagles get to have a home game.
Because they won their conference.
Yeah, that's just one of those things. I'm like, you didn't play well enough during the course of the season to get a home playoff game. You should have to hit the road. I mean, that's my opinion. I know that's not the structure, but that's my opinion.
That's not the structure. Now they do reseed after that first one, though.
Yeah, I just think maybe they should seed it 1 through 6 or whatever, and then just do it that way. And if your record's good enough, you get a home game. If it's not, you have to hit the road because. Seattle's going to go to Philadelphia, and I don't know. I mean,
they could have taken care of that if they'd beaten San Francisco.
If not for that 5-yard penalty.
There you go.
Yeah, there's that. Actually, though, I think that was set, though. I think they were going to have to go to Philadelphia either way. The question was whether or not the 49ers were going to be the 1 seed. So I'm not sure if that's 100% correct, but I think that's right. But, yeah, I mean, the only reason Philadelphia is in the playoffs, though, is because the Cowboys – they fired Jason Garrett today, by the way, finally, because the Cowboys were just atrocious after the first drive of every game this year. I just could not figure that team out for anything.
Yeah, it seemed like they had a lot of talent, but it did not defensively. They were not great.
Yeah.
Offensively, it didn't. They scored a lot of points, but didn't win very many close games.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was just a team that, if you like Dallas, very, very frustrating.
Yeah, I'd hate to be a Cowboys fan.
And
it's got to be a miserable
And it looks
existence.
like it's time for a new direction.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Just off the top, so who do you think is going to win the Super Bowl?
Baltimore, Kansas City.
Okay.
One of those two.
Yeah, I'm with you. I would say this about both those teams. Kansas City, outside of Patrick Mahomes, has the other player in the NFL that seems to be indefensible.
Tyreek Hill.
Yep, and that's the same thing with Lamar Jackson for the Ravens. There do not seem to be answers defensively for those two players.
That's correct.
Because they're just so talented versus everybody else on the field. So fast versus everybody else on the field.
They play at a different speed.
They do indeed. They do indeed. Well, this is Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, the in-state rivalry, the men's basketball game, all men's basketball games was played Saturday, and Kentucky pulled out the overtime win. And to be honest with you, I really thought Kentucky had that game won in regulation. I thought Louisville did a good job coming back and getting it to overtime to start with.
It was surprising, as I said. Most of the time, the UKU of L game is not great basketball. Just too much emotion. I think with Pitino out, it's changed a little bit.
Yeah, Kentucky's not quite as so wrapped up in the idea that the coach over there used to be their coach.
Yeah, and Chris Mack is a little bit more even keel than Rick. So even Louisville's not as tight.
Right.
To be honest with you.
Yeah,
and the second half was played really well. If you just watch the second half, the last 10 minutes, each team made plays.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like Louisville just lost the game or whatever. I mean, it was play after play after play. People were making shots, and that's kind of what you like to see. Louisville came back. They were down 12 at one time. They came back, but really, the difference was Well, the negatives for Louisville, they were 9 out of 20 from the free throw line.
Yeah.
And that's, when you lose a game in overtime and you only go 9 out of 20.
Yeah.
I mean, that just, there's that's tough.
They're called freebies for a reason, but people miss them so much in pressure situations.
It's really amazing that Louisville got to overtime when they're 9 out of 20. And
Right.
then Louisville's two best shooters, Noah is by far their best player. He only had 8 points.
Uh-huh.
He did not play well. And for them to beat big-time teams, he's got to play better. He didn't play very well in their loss to Texas Tech.
Yeah.
And some of their losses last year down the stretch, when he doesn't play well, they don't really have a lot of answers. Mm-hmm. And then McMahon, their other good shooter, he was like 1 for 7 from 3.
Yeah.
What was remarkable is they stayed in the game because some of their other players played well. Enoch had a great game. Sutton played well. Their point guard, not Perry, the other point guard, the transfer that came in, he had a really good game.
Mm-hmm.
For Kentucky, if Kentucky shoots it the way they shot it against Louisville, they can beat anybody.
Yeah.
And they made 9 or 10 threes. I mean, they went 3 weeks without making hardly any, and then they really shot the ball well, which seems to be a recurring thing. Especially, I mean, they give them a few days off, and and that could be that Calipari mojo. But Maxey was really good. He had 28 points, freshman.
I think he is a legitimately good player.
He is. Quickly was 8 out of 8 from the line down the stretch. They made every free throw down, just the opposite of Louisville. They made theirs. Quickly had 18 points. Nick Richards just came out of nowhere. I mean, he had 11 points, 10 rebounds, had 7 in overtime.
Yeah.
And then Higgins is a really good player. I mean, he had 8 or 9 assists, 10 or 12 points. He's defensively got the last steal to end the game.
Yeah.
Give Kentucky credit. If Kentucky shoots it that way and they get that type of effort and performance, they shouldn't be losing to the Evansvilles and to the Utahs of the world. That's if you're a UK person, that's the type of team that's the type of team that you expect to win.
Yeah. And you mentioned Higgins. I think that's one of the things you pointed out last week when we did the show is that game was a lot was going to ride on how he played, especially defensively.
Yeah, he's a really good defensive point guard.
And it proved to be that was the critical difference. I mean, that's why I thought Louisville really had no chance coming back and getting it
and
into
they did.
overtime.
And give Louisville credit.
Yeah,
that's
I mean,
right.
so there.
I think both teams can take something out of it.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, if you're a fan of either of those, no matter the outcome, you can look down your schedule because they're both going to play some tough games in their conferences.
Well,
and say,
Louisville more so than UK.
Well, that's true. I don't know. Maybe the SEC will surprise people again this year. Probably not.
It's been
all
awful.
Those seniors are gone.
Yeah, it's been awful this year.
Yeah, last year was a banner year for the SEC because it had a bunch of leftover players who had experience, and they all played well last year.
Looks kind of down right now.
Yeah, it does. Meanwhile, the college football playoffs started on Saturday. LSU absolutely obliterated Oklahoma.
Maybe in the best performance I've ever seen of a quarterback. Burrow, 7 touchdowns in one half. That's 49 points at half.
Yeah, he threw 4 of them to Justin Jefferson, who seemed to be uncoverable.
And then he ran one in the start of the third quarter.
Just for fun. Just to add one.
Just a no contest with Oklahoma. I mean, LSU just maybe there's not a number 4 team this year. I mean, I don't know, but Oklahoma, they've been in it now 3 times, and outside of one.
Yeah.
I think they've been in it 4 times, I'm sorry. They have just laid some serious eggs.
I went down and looked at the rankings afterwards, and I could not pick out anybody else to put in because I wasn't going to put Georgia in there.
No.
They had just lost LSU
I agree.
in a lopsided game.
I guess Oregon would be the only other one, but they weren't going to beat LSU.
But they had a couple of bad losses really during the course of the season.
They did. I agree.
So, I mean, there wasn't a 4th team.
But
You're right.
The Oklahoma Conference, Big 12, they just don't defend good enough.
And that's what I was going to say. You mentioned Joe Burrow. He had an outstanding game, yes. But there were plays where Oklahoma brought a blitz and they didn't get close to him.
Right, but he had a great performance, but he's had a great year, though.
Yeah.
They're just scoring against everybody.
Yeah. And he did have there were a couple of passes in the first half that should have been intercepted that he threw. They weren't. The Oklahoma played the play, they just didn't make the play. They gave him an extra lease on life in those moments instead of even rattling him a little bit, which allowed him to just stay comfortable and just continue to light him up.
Great player. He's the number 1 pick.
And meanwhile, Clemson came back to beat Ohio State.
That was a great game.
Yes, it was. That one was worth watching. And I don't know. there's a lot of talk going in about the difference between Burrow and Trevor Lawrence and that kind of thing. And if Lawrence was eligible this year to be in the NFL draft, which one would be the number one pick? And the bottom line is whoever gets either one of these guys in the next couple of years is going to get what I think will be a very good NFL quarterback.
Well, I think the number one pick of this year and next year's draft will be playing in the finals.
Yes, I believe you were right. And look, I thought Ohio State defensively was really good.
They were good.
And I thought they did a lot of things well.
It was a heck of a game.
It was. I thought this was a game where I thought Ohio State's defense was fantastic and Clemson's offense is actually fantastic, and that was the two strengths. I didn't think Ohio State's offense was as great, and I'm not sure about Clemson's defense because it's going to be interesting to see if they can solve LSU's offense.
And nobody has all year.
Nope. So I think it's going to be a game worth watching. I actually believe this will be a great national championship game. We've had some stinkers in these playoffs through the years, but I think this one may be worth watching.
I think it's LSU.
I do too. I mean,
I'm
look,
not going out on a limb.
If Clemson can't get any more pressure than anybody else has this year, and he's played some of the best defenses you can play in the nation.
You got to score 40 to beat LSU.
Yeah, I mean, he'll light you up. And look, his receivers are fantastic
they
too.
Are.
Running backs are good.
Scheme, they got it all. I mean, it's
Yeah.
New Orleans. It's the New Orleans Saints is the coordinator basically.
Yep, that's right. Well, this is Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. This is our last show of the decade, John.
Really? That's impressive.
Yeah, it's been an interesting decade for you.
Had some changes, yes, but I've enjoyed it.
Yes.
I've had a good run, and I've enjoyed this show. What are we going on, 3 years?
Yeah, we will. Our fourth year will start in August, so we're at 3.5 years, John,
Wow.
of doing this. Can you believe that?
I can't believe we're still on.
I know, they haven't taken us off yet. As a matter of fact, they gave us a bigger radio station
That's
to talk to
right.
people.
That's exactly
They can pick
right.
us up from Bowling Green to Glendale. That's awesome.
That's it's been fun. Thank you to McDonald's.
Absolutely, yes. If not for them, we'd not be able to do this, and I would like for us to get some more people on. So if you're interested in being on a part of this show, you can always hit us up here at Commonwealth Broadcasting. You can connect with me on Twitter, JBrownESPNKY, if you'd like to try to get in touch with me there. You can listen to John doing the women's Hilltoppers games at home. So you'll be back on the air next week when they come back to Diddle Arena.
Well, looking forward to it.
And some TV these days for you, too.
Little ESPN TV. Yep.
It doesn't get any better than this. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for listening to us and allowing us to talk to you each week. This is Brown Sports Bag, brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow.
Thanks for listening, and be sure and join James and John once again next Monday at 4 for the Brown Sports Bag, a local weekly sports machine presented by McDonald's of Glasgow.
Coming soon to your FM dial, this is Fox Sports Radio, WCDS Glasgow, AM 1230.